Welcome to the Focus and Chill podcast, where we discuss productivity tactics that work for neurodivergent individuals.
Every episode, we interview guests with lived experience of neurodiversity who also have a solid productivity and habit game, and pass the learnings on to you, our wise and benevolent audience.
We're your hosts, Jeremy and Joey.
I'm Joey, and I coach creatives to get moving on their most ambitious projects through the power of solid habits and strong focus. I'm also a perpetual student of psychology and perpetually on a quest to a one-armed chin-up.
And I'm Jeremy, a neurospicy software developer turned startup founder, building the Focus Bear app to help people with ADHD and autism thrive at work. My cool party trick is leaving parties early so I can get to sleep in time for my 2-hour-long morning routine. The Focus and Chill podcast is brought to you by Focus Bear, a focus enhancement app for ADHDers. That's adults with both combined autism and ADHD. I'm Jeremy, I'm an ADHDer myself. I'm the founder of Focus Bear and also one of the hosts of this podcast. I built Focus Bear for myself originally because I was constantly getting distracted by my phone and my laptop. I wanted a way to tame my ADHD monkey mind so I'd stop going down rabbit holes and actually get work done, but also get off my computer and my phone in the evening so I'd be able to sleep properly. It's working perfectly for me and it's helping a lot of ADHDs as well. I'd love for you to try it. It's available for Mac, Windows, iOS and Android, and it leverages most of the productivity strategies we talk about on the podcast. You can jump onto focusbear.io or just Google Focus Bear and try it out. Let me know what you think. Welcome to episode number 96 of the Focus and Chill podcast. I'm thrilled to be joined by April Lea today. April is an ADHD founder with a background in product management and software engineering. She is passionate about removing the barriers that stop neurodivergent people from building themselves meaningful and sustainable careers. April was late diagnosed with autism and ADHD in 2021 after spending her entire life bulldozing through walls to survive and integrate with society. When her disabilities finally caught up with her, her entire life had to change, and that is what fueled the creation of the Neurodiversity Network, the online career hub that wants to break down the barriers to meaningful careers for neurodivergent individuals around the world. Welcome to the show, April.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Really privileged and happy to be here.
Yeah, and really great to speak with you. I've been a member of the Neurodiversity Network for a while now, and I'm really glad that you've created this community. And there's a coaching call that I'm going to attend after this as well. We'll have a lot of experience together today. So to start off with, I'm keen to hear about the 2021 moment where things came crashing down after, I love the way you put it in the bio, bulldozing through walls to survive in the corporate world. What was that like?
Yeah, I think that my story is potentially going to resonate with any other mums or neurodivergent mums that might be listening to this after we finish recording. What really happened was I fell pregnant in 2020, which was around the time of COVID, and I already knew that there was something that was different about me. I've known since I was a child that there was something that was different about me. I just didn't seem to fit in quite as well as what other kids did, and I just felt like I had to work twice as hard, and I was constantly getting feedback that I wasn't doing enough or that I should be doing more. But in 2021, after I had my child, I wasn't experiencing postpartum depression. I wasn't experiencing postpartum anxiety. I was experiencing something else that I still cannot to this day properly put into words, but it felt as though my capacity to cope, my window of tolerance was just shrinking significantly day by day until eventually one day I found myself struggling to even get out of bed that morning. The thought of trying to go to work was just beyond any possibility of what I thought I could do that day. And I remember crying to my husband saying, I don't know what's wrong. I can't do anything. I can't even shower. I can't even get dressed. Like there is absolutely no part of me that can do anything other than lay in this bed and cry. And that was when he got quite concerned about me, I suppose. I had developed a chest infection about 6 months prior that still no antibiotics were fixing. So I was a bit sick. I believe that they narrowed it down to being called atypical pneumonia by the end of it, but the antibiotics weren't working on that. My iron levels were really low. So I had quite a lot of physiological issues happening at the same time as I was experiencing like these mental blockages. But the best way that I can describe it is it felt as though the filing cabinet that I normally had access to carry out any of the things I needed to do in my daily life, whether that was cooking meals or getting dressed for work or being able to navigate grocery shopping, that filing cabinet suddenly became locked and I couldn't open it anymore. I'd lost the key to it basically. And so I didn't have any memory, or I didn't have any cognitive ability to retain any of the way of doing anything. It just suddenly felt as though it was all gone. What essentially then ensued was I had a pretty severe mental health episode where I was involuntarily committed to one of the public health mental health wards here in Queensland. And as part of my psychiatric assessment in that intake, the psychiatrist, bless his cotton socks, said, I'm going to put you down for an autism and ADHD assessment. So I was on that waiting list for a couple of months before I then did get assessed and was subsequently given the diagnosis of ADHD combined, autism level 2, and I also had a bit of CPTSD thrown in the mix there as well, which my preceding mental health care team believe is most likely a result of me bulldozing through as much as I had throughout life up until that point. So 2021 was a pretty confronting year. A lot of things had to change. My entire world got turned upside down essentially from that point, because I got told that if I ever wanted to be able to unlock my filing cabinet and access those skills again, that I was going to have to completely change a lot of the way that I was living my life.
That sounds like real awakening at that point. Did you have any inkling before things started getting really difficult that there might be a component of autism or ADHD? You said you had always felt different, but did you have a sense that it might be like that?
I did have some inklings, particularly my husband at the time. We got together in 2016 and we moved in together, I think, in 2018. And after we moved in together, he started dropping little remarks like, oh, my autistic little girlfriend and things like that, because of the way that I would have things set up in the house, or the way that I would need to have meals structured a certain way and things like that. He had a little bit more familiarity with autism than what I did at the time. My understanding of autism came from my brother, who is autistic, and he was very much the stereotypical representation of autism. So I never really saw myself in him. However, my husband's best friend is autistic and is a little bit more like me, I guess you could say. His best friend and I can often quite frequently clash heads because of how similar and rigid we are in the way that we believe and see things. So he definitely had a little bit more of an understanding. But when he was making those jokes, I was quite dismissive of it. I didn't really think, oh, yeah, like, I'm going to go and get assessed, or maybe that is what maybe I am autistic. I just put it down to my husband being a bit of a jokester.
When you were saying before that you are really, I guess, grateful for that psychiatrist for noticing it, I guess at that point, did you have more openness then to a diagnosis after going through that crisis?
Yeah, I definitely went down the rabbit hole of what the heck does autism and ADHD actually look like? And what I found was really resonating with me. I was really kind of reading it going, oh my God, this is me. This is 100% me. And so it was a bit of a roller coaster of emotions. A lot of late diagnosed people in particular, talk about the grief that can accompany receiving that diagnosis because of all of the what ifs and the could have beens and things like that. I certainly still experienced that too. I definitely experienced a level of grief as well. But because my brother was autistic, I also had a front row seat to how autistic kids in the 90s and early 2000s were treated. And so I didn't quite have as much grief surrounding the, oh, if only I had known sooner, then I could have been helped more, because I believe that I probably would have ended up with more trauma, to be honest. I feel a bit of grief in that I just wish that I had known, I wish that I hadn't just come down to what's wrong with me. I wish that I'd been able to say, well, I'm autistic or I have ADHD, rather than immediately just internalizing there's something wrong with me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What would have been the experiences, I guess you talked about that acute period, but prior to that in your work life, the experiences of bulldozing through, and you've done very well in your career, but it must have had a high cost. What were some of the challenges that you faced at work?
Before I was 21, I had 8 different jobs. I was really struggling to hold down a job. I was either struggling to pass probation period or I was struggling to actually adhere to what I perceived to be stupid rules. I really struggle with nonsense authority, where if there is no particular reason for why there is a rule in place, or if there's a double standard around rules, I can really struggle with that. And before I turned 21, I worked in hospitality, I worked in retail, and then I did also do some office administration work. And in those 3 sectors, the amount of double standards and just the amount of tomfoolery is rife. So I really, really struggled in that environment. So I really had to work quite hard. My career only took off when I was able to actually find a career or find a job that I had a genuine interest in. Like stocking clothes or taking inventory in Cotton On Group at Ruby Shoes was not exciting to me. Selling people pots and pans at house was not exciting to me. Cleaning the dining room at McDonald's and cooking the French fries was not exciting to me. Working in a law firm where one girl was allowed to wear shorts because she had been there for 10 years, but nobody else was allowed to wear shorts, did not interest me. So in all of those other environments, I was very like oppositionist, and I really struggled to get along with people in that environment. I really struggled to integrate. And then I found a job in software development, and I really loved software development. And it was, I think, genuinely just from that sheer interest-based driven nervous system that ADHDers have, that I think that I was actually able to really succeed. And equally to that, I had some really great managers that just inherently understood that I was a little bit different and worked with my differences to help support me through that. Whereas in those previous sectors and in those previous jobs, I was just another employee. Whereas at the company that I ended up being a software developer at, it didn't feel like I was just another employee. It felt as though they actually cared about me and wanted the best for me.
Yeah, it's so rare to experience that. I'm really glad that you had that at the start of your career. I also worked in retail and disliked the double standards. The social overhead required in hospitality and retail, I imagine, might be challenging from the autistic perspective. It was for me. How did you find that?
It was a struggle, and I still do struggle with it sometimes, like how many meetings I have to have in a day, because I'm a people leader now. And so part of leadership is obviously being, available for everybody else. And that was really it's still really hard. But in the retail and hospitality, particularly in hospitality, customer service can make or break an experience, but it is also one of the hardest jobs anybody can ever have. Like, I will stand behind that statement. If anybody listening to this is in a customer service job, hats off to you, because you literally are experiencing some of the toughest things that you can do, because human beings can be really beautiful and they can also be in what other universe can you have a 13-year-old girl trying to operate the point of sale system and have a 40-year-old man screaming at her because he got a medium French fries instead of a large French fries? I really struggled with the variability and the unpredictability of those social interactions, because I never knew, and particularly because cash was still a thing when I was working at McDonald's, for example, and when I was working in retail and things. I've got dyscalculia. I'm not good at maths in the slightest. So being handed cash and having to work out how much change to provide back and then having to properly count out that correct change was the most terrifying thing that I still feel that fear of being handed like a $10 note for like a $7.50 meal kind of thing. So I definitely experienced some challenges, like especially on the social front, and then also just on like the simple job front.
Yeah, I can really relate. I remember one time someone gave me a check to pay for their supermarket order, and I couldn't remember what my boss had said. So I tore up the check afterwards and then realized I wasn't meant to do that. I think they had said the opposite of that, and felt very, very bad.
Well, relatable. So relatable.
Right. So we've talked about the challenges, but also talked a little bit about your strengths in terms of software development being something that you were really interested in, and I imagine able to hyper focus on. What are the strengths that you're leaning into now in your work?
I think at the moment I was thinking about this question, and I think that some of the strengths that I believe are from my neurodivergent brain that I am leaning into at the moment is my curiosity. I am on an endless quest to find out the why. I cannot take anything at face value. Everything always has to have an explanation to it, which I think is part of the reason why I struggled and why I had like 8 different jobs before I was the age of 21, right? Is because if somebody said something to me and I would ask back, well, why is it like that? They don't want to have, some 18-year-old questioning them. You know what I mean? And so even now, I have gotten much better at tactfully trying to find out the explanation for it. But that is definitely still a strength of mine, is that I really do love to take something, whether it be a problem or a situation, and I love to examine it from all of the different angles that I can possibly think of to get that full bird's eye 360 view of it. I think of it as in like holding an object in my hand, like a cube, and being able to inspect each of the different sides of the cube, essentially. That is definitely something that I have come to consider a strength. And I believe that it's because of my autism and ADHD that I have got that ability. And it's certainly helpful because it helps me empathize with people. It helps me develop compassion, but it can also help me land on decisions that ultimately end up being the right one. That's not to say that I'm never wrong, though. I can definitely make the completely wrong decision sometimes, but I believe that being able to impartially and from an objective standpoint observe or inspect a situation or a problem, I believe that that can really, really help me deliver the best outcome and the best decision.
100%. And also, even what you said at the start there in terms of being the 18-year-old who has the courage to ask why and now the tact to ask it in a better way. I'm still working on the tactful side of it, but I think that the lack of filter for me is sometimes an advantage in that a lot of people are too afraid to ask those type of questions, which is so important to ask. And I'd consider that a strength as well.
I would 100% agree with that. And, that you're 100% correct. I love the way that you phrased that just then. I didn't have, had the bravery, didn't have the filter to ask the why, but didn't necessarily have the tact. I can still definitely not have the tact. It really depends on my mood. When I have, for example, am at like the smallest little bit of window of tolerance left, then there is no more space for tact. There is no more space for anything other than just why? Like, why is this a thing?
Yeah, but it needs to be asked. So now let's talk about your work projects. You've got a few hats that you wear. Do you want to describe the roles that you have?
Yeah, absolutely. So we spoke about the Neurodiversity Network a little bit, which I will touch on, but the Neurodiversity Network is not my full-time job. My full-time job is in tech, where I am the head of product for developer productivity and platforms at REA Group. In that role, I lead the team of product managers that are responsible for building solutions that are going to solve the rest of REA's developers' problems. Platform engineering is a pretty huge movement that's kind of coming out of what was originally DevOps culture. It's basically like the next scale or the next level of innovation for particularly larger organizations. That's a pretty meaty subject and topic area to be in. REA Group, we experience millions of active users every single day. So making sure that the platforms and the architecture and the infrastructure that support those millions of users every single day are actually performant and reliable. It's a pretty big task, but I absolutely love it. Tech has been my passion my entire life, but I've got a bit of a deeper calling, and that deeper calling is within trying to help other people that may have ended up in a similar situation to myself re-enter or navigate the workforce. And that's where the Neurodiversity Network really is starting to come to life. I built the Neurodiversity Network as it was originally meant to simply be an online resource. It was completely free to access to begin with. And I had no idea how to run a business. My intention was never for it to be a business. But then people started messaging and emailing as though it was a business, and we're expecting a certain level of service, and we're expecting a certain level of, they had like expectations attached to it. And I just fumbled my way through it before I was like, okay, actually, no, we need to do something about this, especially because the site was continuously crashing because of such high traffic. The Neurodiversity Network started out as being a completely free online resource and is now a membership hub that people can access, where they can connect in the community. As you already know, Jeremy, they can attend the events. We put on lots of monthly events, which includes the coaching hour with certified accredited coaches. And we've also got lots of resources in there where we've partnered with content providers like Dr. Megan and Anef from Neurodivergent Insights to help people understand either how to work with themselves or work with their environment with their brains. So it's only 2 years old, and it's been completely bootstrapped, and it's completely volunteer run. It's thanks to a myriad of amazing volunteers that it is in the space that it's in. And the next steps for the Neurodiversity Network really are for us to continue leaning out our mentoring program. So there is really only two, I guess, different avenues at the moment for neurodivergent folk trying to access career support. They either have to rely on community third spaces like Facebook groups or, community spaces like the Neurodiversity Network to access anecdotal, not necessarily accredited or reliable career advice, or they access coaching. And the dichotomy of like the affordability, community-based is basically free, especially if you use a Facebook group. Coaching is upwards of $180 to $200 an hour. Like, it's very, very expensive. You may as well be going to a psychologist for those types of prices. And so the Neurodiversity Network has got a mentoring program that it's only $200. And for that $200, you get 6 hours of mentoring where you get paired with a more senior individual in a similar industry to yourself that is able to partner with you on your, I guess you could say, your challenges, or simply help you navigate the workforce. That is my current focus, is really building out that mentoring program. We've had quite a few mentees go through it, and the feedback has been absolutely amazing. So that's where my current focus is at. And then off to the side, my third thing that I'm doing is that I am 4 months away from completing a counseling degree so that I can become a certified counselor. I'm really, really excited about that part as well. I'm really, really leaning into the human services side of the human services industry, and it's really exciting.
I didn't realize that. Well done on getting through that.
Thank you. It's been a lot.
Yeah, well. So with those multiple hats, what do you do when you're not working?
Thinking about work.
Same.
No, when I'm not working, I'm actually a rat enthusiast. I have got a mischief of rats whom I absolutely love and adore, and I've got a bioactive setup. I spend a lot of time playing with them and hanging out with them. I did have 5, and sadly, the rat lifespan is between 2 to 3 years. They are slowly getting older, and the mischief is dwindling. I've got my rats. I've also got a child who spends a lot of time with me, and we do a lot of outdoor and fun activities together. And then finally, my most favorite way in the entire world to blow off steam would be to dance. I absolutely love dancing.
Imagine with the child as well, dancing, or is that separately?
Sometimes, but I think it's definitely a separate activity. I introduced him to Boris Brucker a couple of weeks ago. So now when we're in the car, he'll say to me, "Mummy, is this Boris?" And I'll say, "Yes, this is Boris."
Right.
So I'm slowly getting him into the rave scene, but he's only 4, so we've got time.
Nice. Now, I remember you went to Ibiza at the end of last year. Was
Yes.
that?
It was amazing. I got to see Kolsch, I got to see Camel Fat, I got to see Don Dollar, which was pretty amazing. And Ibiza itself is just also the most, like, such a beautiful place. I absolutely adored everything from the food all the way through to the parties were really fun as well. But it was really nice to be able to just go and dance. And it was also my first holiday in 4 years. So it was like an extra layer of excitement.
Yeah. How do you cope with the sensory side of rave events and nightclubs?
With loop earplugs. So
Okay.
loop earplugs, and I typically don't dance in the dance group. So obviously you've got your DJ decks and you've got, the dance floor, and the thought of like going into the dance floor is enough to make my skin crawl. So I'll basically often go off to the side, or I'll be at the back to do the dancing. Or funnily enough, and here's a really fun fact, there's normally quite a lot of space right at the front where the decks are as well. So, for example, Rebuke is one of my favorite DJs. He is my favorite DJ in the whole entire world and has been for 5 years or so. And he finally came to Brisbane after a really long hiatus of coming to Australia. And I went to his show, and there was like nobody at the front of where the decks were. Like, it was quite a lot of space. And then there was like this huge, like really tight knit group of people. And at the back, there was like more space again. So I positioned myself right at the very front and it was great. But ultimately, I know my clubs to go to. So I don't go to certain clubs because I know that they're too busy. I go to certain clubs where there is always a lot of space to dance on the dance floor. The people there are almost regulars. And so you'll see the same familiar faces, and everyone is really respectful of each other. And for me, it's been really about finding the community and really leaning into that community that I mesh with. So that's how I deal with the sensory experiences, is loop earplugs for the noise, make sure that I have plenty of space around me, and ultimately I'm just there for the music.
Yeah, nice. There's some really good tips. Do you find the lights are an issue, or you're fine with the lighting?
Lighting is actually something that I'm drawn to. So, for example, here in my home, I don't have any overhead lighting on ever. I've got this beautiful star astral projection that projects up onto my roof. And I've got I've got like 5 different lamps that are all like different colors. And it basically fills the room at nighttime with like rainbow effect. And it is so sensorily calming. That is the one thing that I think I'm a massive sensory seeker in. I'm definitely a sensory seeker when it comes to the touch of certain materials like silk or even like a really, really nice cotton. Excuse me. However, when it comes to lighting that is like sensual and wavy and multicolored and just kind of calming is so beautiful. So a light show at a rave is almost like heaven to me.
Got it. Nice. Now I'm curious whether that might correspond with productivity tips as well. Do you have certain types of lighting that help you to focus when you're working?
Definitely. I often find that natural light is the biggest thing for me. So you'll see that I've got a beautiful big window right here, and I've got natural light filtered throughout. If I had to work under fluorescent lights, that would probably be like enough to put me in the ground. I really struggle under fluorescent lighting. I don't know if it's the gentle hum of the noise of the lighting and then plus just the artificialness of it. But I often either find myself going to sleep or dissociating, and I just cannot do it. Like it's a huge, huge struggle for me. So I definitely do find that certain lighting, particularly natural lighting, is always really good. And then at nighttime, having a monitor light that is close to my monitor so that it's not just the screen's brightness glazing into my eyes also really helps me to stay focused and not to feel fatigued. My biggest, like the way that I guess I optimize my productivity during my working hours is I have to lean into the Pomodoro technique. So I've got a little timer here on my desk.
I've got the same one.
Yeah, it's so good. I will put that on, and then that's like when I've got it on and I can see that it's like ticking down the time, it helps me to understand that there is like an ending in sight, especially if it's something that I'm working on that I just cannot be asked to work on, that I just am not interested in. I'm like, okay, April, you've only got 20 more minutes left to go of this. Like, you've got to get it done. And then I give myself the challenge of you have to get this thing done within like 3 Pomodoro cycles. And then I have the pressure of like trying to beat myself because I don't want to have to sit with the shame of not succeeding. So it's very much gamification for me for productivity.
With the monitor lamp, does that actually clip to your monitor, or is it a desk lamp next to the monitor?
It's a desk lamp next to the monitor. I looked at the ones that clip on, but I'm just not fully sold on them. So I just have like a table lamp that's beside my monitor that kind of counteracts the light.
Yeah. It's a good idea. And are there some productivity tips that you've tried and don't work for you? People often talk about eat that frog not working well for them.
Does not work for me either. Like, I could not imagine anything worse than trying to eat the frog first thing in the morning. There will be like occasionally, like I will wake up, and again, this is going to be more for the AFAB and the women that are listening to this, but there are certain parts of my menstrual phase where, yeah, absolutely, I'll be like, I'm going to eat that frog right off the bat. But it's more like 8 times out of 10, I really need to start small with like little tasks to help establish that momentum. A lot of people argue that you should be breaking the frog down into little tasks to help you build up that momentum. And to that, I say to them, yeah, but it's more about the fact that it's the overarching big piece of work that I'm trying to wrap my head around. Like, I want to be able to have a task completed within 10 minutes to give me that dopamine rush so that I can then move on to the next one. The eat the frog does not always work for me at all. There's like a small little like 3-day window where it will work. And then the rest of it, it's like, good luck, Chuck.
Any other tips that you'd give people or things that you're experimenting with at the moment?
Right now, what I'm experimenting with is giving myself a maximum of 3 things to do each day, or like giving myself a maximum of 3 slots of if I was to do anything today, what would those 3 things be? And not trying to narrow the scope down to only be work related. I'm trying to blend personal life in with work life. For example, today my to-do list is like at the bare minimum, I need to get to the shops to go and get myself some more chocolate protein because my son and I love our chocolate protein. So that's not even a work-related task. However, if I get that done today, I still want to feel good within myself. And I'm really trying to break down the barrier that society has historically said is professional versus personal. And I'm trying to blend it because if I focus only on professional, then my personal things get left to the wayside and then I get overwhelmed in my personal life. And so it's like you end up seesawing backwards and forwards between being on top of things from a professional perspective, but your personal life is burning to the ground, or vice versa. Whereas I think for ADHDers in particular, I think it's much more valuable to see it all as just one conglomeration and all as one life, balance accordingly like that, so that you don't end up with like one or the other or having to pick and choose. Because I think that dichotomy of picking and choosing between professional versus personal priorities is really what can lead to the overwhelm and can also lead to the lack of balance.
100%. And some of those tasks, like for me, going to the shops is actually quite hard. A lot of things to think about in terms of how do I get there and
how do I get there? What do I do once I get into the shops? Do I try to roam the aisles to it is grocery shopping for me is a very, very hard thing, and click and collect and grocery deliveries were 2 of the best inventions.
100%. How about in terms of people management? Are there tactics that you found helpful now that you're looking after a team of product managers? How do you manage one-on-ones with them and anything related to that?
Structure, and scaffolding is what I would say. I dedicate certain days of my week to certain topics or themes. For example, Mondays are always an admin day where I need to plan out my week. I need to get ahead of any prep for anything that's coming up. I typically will do my expense claims, or I'll go into Workday and do my Workday tasks. Some people say to do that on a Friday, but then I have the weekend. So by the time the Monday rolls around, I can't remember what I said I was going to do on the Friday. So I do everything instead on like the Monday. Mondays are my admin day. Tuesdays are my get across all of the work that's currently happening day. So I'll have like work in progress catch-ups with each of my PMs, or I'll be dedicating time to go through the Jira board and like read up on the updated tickets and the comments and things like that. Wednesdays are cross-group like collaboration days, and that's where I typically schedule. So Wednesdays and Thursdays are where I typically schedule a lot of my meetings across the lines of business within REA Group. And then Fridays are my meeting free day to basically do reporting, to get up to speed on my extra initiatives that I need to do as a leader, and focus in on any strategy and other goals work that I need to catch up on as well. Every second Thursday is where I do my one-on-ones with my team, and like we have monthly development sessions as well. So Tuesdays are always like a work in progress day, but every second Thursday and like the last Thursday of the month is always like their professional development days, basically. And I've found that that works really well because it helps them also understand that on certain days I'm going to reach out to them about certain things so that they also start to get a little bit of a rhythm as well.
I like that. I'd like to adopt day theming because right now it's just all combined. There's no real structure to it. Some days have a lot of meetings, and then I don't really have a single day where I'm only doing focused work, for example. I think it would help me if I had it set up like that.
And it's not a perfect science. Like there's definitely days where on Mondays I'll have cross line of business catch ups and things like that. But I find that if I at least try to keep it to that rough kind of schedule, then the context switching overhead is not quite as much.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And part of that as well is that on the other days, you're taking breaks from work. So we're going to take a break right now.
Hi there, Focus and Chillers. Are you ready to supercharge your knowledge in the realms of creativity, tech, and psychology? Come check out my fortnightly newsletter. In each edition, you'll get quick wins and actionable takeaways that you can put into practice right away. If this sounds like you, I'd love to have you as a reader. Subscribe for your fortnightly dose of insights. The link is in the show notes. And now, let's get back to the show.
Okay, we're back from our break, and we were just talking about structure on a weekly level. I'm curious about your structure on a daily level in terms of what your mornings and your evenings might look like. What do you do in the morning?
I try to exercise because exercise for me is the ultimate regulation tool that I have found. It's almost the gold star for me of what is going to help me have as full of a window of tolerance for the day as possible. For a long time there, I used to like race road bikes and be like a road cyclist. And it was really, really fun, really, really great. However, because of how much training, you need to spend 10 plus 15 hours a week on the bike in addition to trying to do a full-time job, I was finding it really hard to do both of those things. So when I say I exercise, there is definitely, because to help me regulate and have a good window of tolerance, there's definitely a line that can be crossed. The types of exercise I typically do are now Pilates, and I do lots of walking. I guess what you could say is low impact style exercising to really help me get the most out of the benefits of exercise. I wake up very early in the morning. My alarm is set for 4:30, but I don't actually get out of bed until 5. And I used to start my day with a cup of coffee, but I've actually found that if I instead have a cup of coffee at, say, 8 a.m. instead of 5 a.m., that like my brain and my body just seems to respond to that better. So I just have a hot water in the mornings now. And I don't know why, but like I'll just sit in bed for that first 10 minutes and have my hot water. And then I'll get up and I'll start my day. And that will typically be via exercise or something similar to that. And I try to give myself at least an hour in the mornings to just pottering around, just trying to figure out what my body is feeling like. I have a little book that I use to gauge, using some data, my like energy levels. So I've got 5 questions in the book that say things from, I feel like I could eat a really good meal right now, all the way to I feel ready to tackle the day. And I give myself a score of 1 to 5 for each of these questions. And if I score anything less than the 15, then I need to have like a very chill kind of low day where I don't push myself too hard. Whereas if I score over a 20, then I'm firing on all cylinders. I'm ready for what the day is going to throw at me. And I kind of start to plan my day according to how I have scored on this questionnaire. And just having the data points to back up how I seem to be feeling has been really, really useful in helping me understand how to navigate the waves of like my autism and ADHD, because some days I'll be at the top of my game and I'll be so ready to tackle the world. And other days I am just like, I don't want to get out of bed today. And so I need to plan accordingly. So I found that's like been a really, really useful morning routine for me.
I like that. They sound like a good set of questions. I have a question that is probably not detailed enough of just what is my energy level like as I wake up. But I think there's something about maybe alexithymia that I'm not really able to answer that question in an effective manner. Whereas I probably could answer a concrete question like, am I ready for a good meal? Or what would some of the other ones that you mentioned there?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of exactly why I've got the questions structured the way they do. Because if I just go, oh, how am I feeling? One of the things when I was cycling and when I was racing that I really struggled with was my coach would say to me, oh, just gauge how you feel and just do your efforts according to that. And I'd be like, no, I need you to tell me how much power I should be outputting and what my heart rate should be at. Because internally in myself, I cannot identify it. I don't know what it is, but it's like, I can feel the sensations and I can feel the feelings, but I don't know if that's just me being a wimp or if that's just me not wanting to push myself. Whereas if I say to myself, oh, like how hungry am I know that my hunger is like a direct link to how good I'm feeling that day just by history and experience of knowing myself and knowing my body. So I found that having really targeted questions that are going to help you define how you're feeling with specific data points can be very beneficial.
Absolutely. The other side of it is the sleep side. You wake up at 4:30 a.m. What time do you go to sleep typically?
I try to be in bed at 8:30 p.m. and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but more often than not, I'll often find myself still awake at about midnight. I really struggle with sleep, no matter how many different types of sleep rituals I have done. I do the whole no screen time, low screen time, bedtime routine, all of it. More often than not, I do have to rely on medication. So I'll either have melatonin, and sometimes even melatonin doesn't scratch the sides. So then I can have Zopiclone or I could have diazepam. Sleep is something that I do really, really struggle with. It's one of those bugbears of mine because I do love sleep. And there's a little part of me that does believe that I struggle with sleep so much because I am naturally actually a night owl. When I was a kid, I would be awake all night long, and that would be when I would be the most productive. Whereas society and the way that my life is, because I have a child and I've got a life that exists outside of my own needs, the daytime is my time to be productive now. And my daytime is the time that I have to function. And so I think that that's why my body struggles against it so much. I think that I'm naturally a night owl. However, I'm in a position where I have to be a daytime person.
That's really tough. Hopefully in the future you might be able to experiment with flipping back the other way.
Maybe one day, we'll see.
Okay, so if people want to connect with you personally or find out about the Neurodiversity Network, where's the best place for them to find you and NDN online?
So LinkedIn is always a really great place to connect with me personally. So April Lea on LinkedIn is my name. Don't wear it out. However, if you want to learn more about the Neurodiversity Network, it is just www.theneurodversitynetwork.com, and you can find us on Instagram and TikTok. And we are pretty receptive to hearing from people. So would love to hear from anybody for anything that they might need. We're really trying to expand out our career support services as well. So if you have a specific career support need that you want some assistance with, we are more than happy to help.
Amazing. Do you have any final words or asks for the audience?
Be kind to yourselves, have compassion. I think that we often get told that. And so I know that I probably sound like every other person that's ever been on this podcast in existence, but it's a really, really important thing to recognize that human beings are complicated creatures and we are still learning so much about what actually human beings are and what makes us tick. And one of the things that I often have to remind myself is that just because I have a brain and Jeremy has a brain and you listening have a brain, that doesn't mean that it's all the exact same brain. All of our brains are different. We are all wired differently. And just because your brain might respond in a certain way to Jeremy's brain or my brain, that doesn't mean that it's wrong. Even the best scientists in the world haven't been able to actually crack that nut. There is no answer to that. We are not computers. We love to use the analogy that we are Linux operating systems that have been trying to operate on Windows our entire lives, but that doesn't actually properly translate into reality because we do not have the exact same compute. We are all very, very different. So be kind to yourself.
We'll wrap the show with that. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Focus and Chill podcast. To listen to other episodes, jump onto podcast.focusbear.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or you know someone who'd be a good fit, email us at team@focusbear.io. Otherwise, stay focused, stay chilled, and peace out.